All right. Welcome to today's podcast. Today we have with us the wonderful Vel Scott. Vel Scott is the founder of Vel Scott's Healthy You, and she is an advocate and leader in the movement of bringing nutrition and healthy living into people's lives. And she provides things like workshops and lectures and food demonstrations as a way to show the power of food and its ability to be a catalyst for better living. So, Vel, welcome to the podcast.
Bryson, thank you for inviting me. I am very honored to be here
Yes.
on this beautiful afternoon in Cleveland.
Yes, here in Cleveland, the Cle. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. What was life like before you started Vel Scott's Healthy You?
Well, speaking of Cleveland, I'm from the deep south, the bayous of Mississippi. I was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi, a few years ago, and migrated here with my family during I guess it was the second or third wave of the Great Migration during the 50s. Came here, was in junior high school, what a change from sunny Mississippi to the winters in Cleveland. But I've adapted and I've enjoyed being here all these years.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm originally from.
Okay. Very cool. What kind of work did you get into before you got into this particular, or have you always been in health and wellness?
Well, I've always, I guess I could say in a way, been in health and wellness because in Mississippi, my grandparents and great-grandparents and aunts and uncles owned a lot of land. And the way we got our food was we grew it. We grew everything in the ground. We had our greens, our potatoes, our peppers, our onions, everything that you had on a typical Sunday buffet, Sunday dinner table. My grandparents and mother and father grew in the garden. So I was introduced to real food at a very young age. Okay.
So food doesn't come from McDonald's or the grocery store.
No, it didn't come from McDonald's. The carrots didn't come wrapped up in a cellophane bag. They came out of the earth. My sister and I planted the seeds and watered them, and then we pulled them out of the ground and wiped them on our shirts and ate it right there in the garden. And this was way before I knew about the term organic. But it couldn't have been any more organic and any more real and natural than pulling it out of the garden and eating it right then and there.
Right. Yeah, that's cool. Many of us don't know where food comes from because we're so used to just buying it fast.
Yeah, going to the store.
Yeah. And so, to my knowledge, you are based sort of in Fairfax, correct?
The University Circle Fairfax area. Our land borders the Fairfax boundary line. But we're technically, the farm, Vel's Purple Oasis, is located in University Circle.
And so what's your connection what do you feel is your connection to Fairfax, the Fairfax neighborhood?
My connection to Fairfax is that when we first came to Cleveland, my dad, before he brought us to Cleveland, lived on Cedar Avenue. And he lived off on 83rd, 89th Platte Avenue, and that's all part of the Fairfax area.
Gotcha.
So I knew of the Fairfax area before I actually came to Cleveland. Didn't know that it had a name. In fact, it didn't have a name at that time. It was just the Cedar Avenue where the middle-class black families lived. So I've always had a connection with Fairfax and University Circle, even before leaving the South.
Now, would you say that's one of your sort of target neighborhoods that you seek to serve with your work, or you think or would you argue it's a little bit broader than simply?
Well, it's broader than the Fairfax University Circle area. We actually target areas where people lack certain resources, knowledge about health and wellness. So we're all over the city of Cleveland and the inner ring suburbs. But Fairfax University Circle is like the heart of where our location is and the heart of where our work is, because that's where the greatest need is.
I see. Beautiful. Well, let's talk about a little bit about Fairfax then, since that's the home base, that's heart at least. And Fairfax neighborhood has gone through several changes since the late 19th century, or as you mentioned, the Great Migration. really shifted the neighborhood from what was predominantly a white neighborhood to was predominantly then a black neighborhood, as black folk migrated from the south to the north to find industrialized jobs, as well as to escape the sort of chokehold of the Jim Crow South as well. And so you see this influx of African Americans into the Fairfax neighborhood and into the east side of Cleveland, so much so that there's the population sort of swells, and there's this peak population in 1950 of 40,000 people in Fairfax. But then, sort of with the irony of, and like you said, many of them are also affluent black professionals.
Right.
But then you see a shift with the irony of civil rights movement and urban renewal and products like that. That leads to both white flight as well as black middle class flight from neighborhoods like Fairfax. And so what happens is you see a population decrease, but then you see also a rise in issues of poverty. Right, and so you see the Fairfax neighborhood shifting from its peak of 40,000 folk in 1950, and that decrease happening even by 1960. And then in 2010, the population is merely 5,000 folk. Right, so from 40,000 in 1950 to 5,000 in 2010. That's a dramatic change.
That is, and it's interesting because when my dad brought us to Cleveland, a lot of the black families lived in the central area on 22nd, 30th, and they call it the Roaring Thirds at that time because that's where we were. And the main reason was because the Greyhound bus terminal was right downtown. Sure. The train station was in Terminal Tower at that time. So when you arrived from Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Georgia, Alabama, you got off the train, you got off the bus, and you didn't have to have a car. You could actually walk to wherever you were going. If you had family people that were already there, or if you had a location that you were going to, you could easily walk to that location. So that was where we started at. We lived with my godmother on 33rd Street. Okay. She had like 3 rooms, a kitchen, a bath, and a bedroom, and all of us, had pallets and things that we laid on the floor, being able to stay with her. But she was one of the first ones to come to Cleveland, and then my dad came. So when you had family there, you actually make room for your family.
Right.
So from the Roaring Thirds, and then you gradually move up to Fairfax. You don't just come in as a new migration traveler and go to Fairfax.
Okay.
But as your income increases, as things change, and as you said, there was the white flight when people began to move out, then there was more opportunities for families like mine. My dad was an auto mechanic. My mom was a homemaker, to move into the Fairfax area.
Gotcha.
And that's where we did. He lived on 80th and Cedar, and that was in the heart of Fairfax. And he lived on 82nd near Capitol Avenue, again, heart of Fairfax.
Okay.
And that's how we ended up being in the Fairfax area.
Yeah, very cool. So you lived through some of these transitions of, like you mentioned, white flight, and then the surge of African American folk living in the Fairfax neighborhood. What was it like? What was it like to actually live through that? Because I read about it and study it as a student, but what was it like seeing some of these transitions for you?
It was exciting coming from the Deep South, coming to where we had land, we had warm weather 7 or 8 months out of the year, and then coming to Cleveland, where it was seasonal. We came here, and I remember in around July or August, in time to go to school, and the weather was nice, the big wide streets and everything. It was quite different because my dad would take us and drive us up and down Cedar Avenue and say that the woman who owns this store, she looks like you. And I was wondering, well, how could they all look like me? They don't even know me. But what he meant was they were people of color that owned restaurant, owned dress shops, beauty salons, all up and down Cedar Avenue. So it was interesting to see that. Coming from the South, I didn't see black ownership like that. One of the things that we did have that I didn't see here was we owned land. And those of us who didn't own land were able to barter. Well, we will take this 200 acres of land and we will cultivate it, we will grow and plant on it, And then the owner, well, would you give us a share of it? So we did have the land, the ownership, but coming to Cleveland, seeing black businesses, and in particularly black women that were in charge and owning their own businesses was very enlightening to me and my sisters.
Wow, that's really cool. Well, speaking of that, I think Fairfax has a really sort of rich history around, like you said, prolific African American women in leadership. The city's actually, or the neighborhood's actually named after Florence Fairfax, right? And she's just someone who labored hard and long for 38 years in the recreation department, and eventually was promoted to the assistant commissioner of the recreation department. Right. And just did these profoundly important things for both Fairfax and surrounding areas. And actually was even given this, appointed to this position of the Special Bureau of Special Activities.
Yes.
A little bit before she got appointed to the Assistant Commissioner, where she was really charged to serve gang members and sort of reduce juvenile delinquency in the area. And I say that because again, Florence is well deserving of having the Fairfax neighborhood named after her in the Recreation Center, because she wasn't just trying to climb up the bureaucratic ladder to get a name for herself, to get a title, but she was really working for justice and fighting for equity. And so I'm curious, as you mentioned, this presence of black excellence and black business ownership and these things, how does someone like Florence Fairfax inspire you? How did they inspire your work? And maybe what are some other folk who inspired the sort of beautiful work that you get to do and have been doing for decades?
Well, I knew of her. I remember reading about her. We heard about her in school. There wasn't Black History Month at that time, but there was her presence, was so huge in the community here. She's a black woman, and we're having a community named after her. But there were, along with Miss Fairfax, there were women like Josephine Walker, who was an attorney, Josephine Trevisana, another attorney, John Kellogg. There were people in the community who owned businesses. So I was impressed by the fact that, like my father said, these are people that do look like me. They're people of color. So I knew what they were doing. There was Jean Merle Capers. There were law firms in the community. There were real estate businesses. John Carmichael, Carmack, who they said was one of the first black millionaires in real estate, had his office on almost 89th or 83rd and Quincy.
Okay.
At that time.
Sure.
So I was impressed by the fact that if they can do that, then one day I can make a difference, and I'll be able to do that. There were so many restaurants. If you started at 79th and Quincy, there was the Quincy Library.
Okay. When
we first came to Cleveland, my mother walked us up from 67th and Quincy to get library cards, which is now the Langston Hughes Health Center that is owned by the Cleveland Clinic. But at that time, it was the neighborhood Quincy Library. And we lived on 67th and Quincy. We walked up to 79th to get our cards, to get our books. From there was Olivet Institutional Baptist Church. There was a place called the Razel where you could eat. There were just Eccles Poultry Company was there. The Quincy Savings and Loans.
Okay.
One of the first black-owned banks in the country was there. And then I was so fortunate to be able to work for the president of that bank, Charles V. Carr. He was one of the founders of the Quincy Savings and Loan Company on 83rd and Quincy. So you could just come from 55th Street all the way up to 79th, from 79th to 105. And the streets were lined with nice homes, black-owned businesses. It was a community. The Fairfax area was the place that you wanted to be in.
Yeah.
You didn't have to really go downtown for too many things. The law firms were there. Right. Cleveland Clinic, the hospital was there. The library was there. So everything was in your neighborhood.
Yeah. That's really cool. I love that history. And there's such a rich legacy that was there. But if you sort of fast forward, right, 50, 60 years, it's a little bit different, right? Some would say a lot different. If you were to Google, Fairfax, East Side, you would get, predominantly black, high crime, high unemployment, high
Right.
poverty. And that's just one side of the story. I think there's you've already pointed to some of the legacy and the rich history there. But even now, in the midst of this sort of reputation that the Near East Side and Fairfax and this whole sort of row has, what are some other things, in addition to your work? We'll talk about your work here in a second, but what are some of the other things that people who don't live in Fairfax or don't work in Fairfax don't know about? What's some of the beauty that's there?
Well, some of the beauty is that the people that live there are dedicated residents. The property is well kept. Sure, there are homes that are in disrepair,
Sure.
but many of the people never left the community. Many of us, as things began to change in the neighborhood with the white flight coming, many of the families had paid for their homes. When their children came along and grandchildren came along, we were told, well, the water is colder up the hill, y'all. Let's go up to Glenville. Let's go over to Glenville. Let's go up this to Mount Pleasant.
Sure.
Because the white families were moving out, and for some reason, the thinking was that if the white families are leaving, then we should leave too, which was a great mistake. But those of us who stayed, who believed in the community, my husband and I had our first business on the Fairfax University Circle boundary. Okay. And then we built a $1 million facility on the fringes of University Circle and Fair Hill.
Okay.
And the Fairfax area. So we've always had a deep belief in the community. We knew that the resources were there. We were surrounded by the cultural area, the art museum, the Cleveland Orchestra.
Yeah.
Main transportation, Euclid Avenue. We knew that the people, the goodness had not left the community. So we, along with many other families, stayed. And now that Fairfax is, people are beginning to look at it through a different set of lens.
Sure.
Now it's a place to come back to. Let's see if there's any property available in Fairfax or University Circle. It's across the tracks from Case. Sure. It's prime property. It's a great location, and the families that stayed have kept their property up. And it's just a wonderful place to be. There's still many fruit trees in the backyards, grapevines, strawberries, beautiful flowers. Even if a house is in disrepair, if a house has been left to sort of fall apart,
sure,
you can look in the backyard and you'll see beautiful flowers. You may even see an apple tree or a pear tree back there. So the beauty is still there. The love is still there. It's just a matter of that we are looking at it now from a different set of standards. We realize now that we were already in paradise. We didn't have to recreate it or reimagine it.
Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful. That if you just Google, people will Google is this a good neighborhood to live in? And Google's going to tell you one story.
One story.
Right.
But get in your car on a Sunday afternoon and just ride down and disregard some of the houses that you see that are abandoned. But look at the ones that have flowers in the yard,
right,
where the fruit trees are in the backyard, the families walking to church. It's still a great community.
Yeah.
But the best is yet to come.
Hey, yes. Come on, somebody. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about your work now. As we talk about Florence Fairfax and the legacy that she left and the amazing work that she did sort of in the civic arena, you've been doing some profoundly impactful work as well, but through health and wellness and that focus. So can you describe the work you've been engaged in over the past 2 decades in that particular arena and how that confronts these larger structural challenges that when you do Google, you'll find those challenges. You won't see the beauty. But how have you sort of added to that beauty and elevated it through the work that you've been doing?
Well, my family and I, my husband and I and children were fortunate, again, to have a facility in the heart of the community. So we had our pulse on what was going on. When we first started with business, we had the Red Carpet Lounge. We were operating 7 nights a week. So just about everyone in the black community came to our facility. So we had a captive audience. You had people to see what we were doing. Well, if this young couple can do this, certainly we can do this. And the health and wellness piece came in because I've always been very avid about good food, clean food, real food.
Sure.
And even though we had our Southern fried chicken, always,
of course,
Polish boys, always, but there was always the greens, the beans, the salads that we served in the restaurant. And as the years went by, we were able to leave the red carpet, go around the corner, and renovate another facility, and then eventually, as I said, build a brand new facility from the ground up.
Okay.
During that time, my husband, being a businessman, being on the go, he was a pro bowler. He was just very active. He came home one day and said that the doctor says, I have hypertension. And I wanted to know, what is that?
Sure.
So he says, well, actually, it's a big fancy word for high blood pressure, and that I'm going to have to change the way I eat.
Okay.
He said, however, I will not be eating bland diet food. So maybe we can come up with something that, I can
a little bit more
eat
tasty.
Healthier.
Right, tasty and healthy.
But it cannot lose its soul.
Hey,
So I said, okay, well, that's a challenge, but I can do that. So I just went back to thinking about my roots in Mississippi, watching my grandparents grow, watching my mother saute, steam, the fresh vegetables, everything. And I decided, well, okay, we're going to make a change, but the whole family, it's not a diet, it's going to be a way of life. So he said, well, I have a better idea. I said, what is that? That we should go to West Africa and see how they live in the motherland. I said, okay, we can do that. So we took about 6 weeks, my husband and I and my son, because my daughter was just getting ready to go to high school and she was doing other things. So we spent those 6 weeks there, just seeing the culture, the people, the foods, came back to Cleveland, and we had a wonderful Sunday dinner buffet. We would do 200 or 300 people. And we gradually began to make modifications of vegetable stock, steaming, cooking without meat, without telling anyone that we've made this major change. In the meantime, the blood pressure medicine that he was on, let's just say he was on 2 or 3 pills a day, actually we were able to help to reverse his not only blood pressure, but his congestive heart failure through the way he ate. We stopped using a lot of oils. Everything was fresh. Everything had a wonderful taste and soul to it.
Yeah.
So with that, with him being out front, people seeing him, well, what is he doing? He's lost weight. He seems to have more energy. What did you do? And I told them about what we were doing with our food, that it was, well, what is it called? I says, well, for lack of a better term, it's Vel's Global Soul Food. Oh, it's that easy. It's that easy. And the Sunday dinner buffet was a platform for us to be able to show people that you don't have to be wealthy to eat healthy, that you can eat your foods that are native to your culture. You don't have to leave your culture, the greens, the beans, the cabbage, the mustard greens, the turnips, all of those things are real food, and they're what they call plant-based foods now.
Right.
So with that being said, we created the Vel Scott's Healthy You.
Okay.
And that was like 20-some years ago, and we've been able to take that knowledge and those classes throughout the community, throughout the city, throughout the state, to say, hey, this is how it's done, and you can do it because we did it.
Wow.
So it's knowledge. It's more that I share knowledge, and the knowledge comes from a person that they trust, that they believe in, because I am anchored in the community. We are anchored. It's a team effort.
Yeah.
I have volunteers, ambassadors that come and work with us to make this wonderful way of life. I don't call it a program because it's a way of life.
Sure.
A reality.
Wow, that's really beautiful, Vel. You mentioned knowledge, and there's the popular saying of knowledge is power, but you're also saying food is power. Like food had the power to transform your husband's health, and has the power to impact and transform communities. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Like what is the power of food that you're trying to share with everyone?
Food is power. Food is very powerful. What you eat is what you are. So if you are eating a high sugar, high fat, if you're eating foods that weigh you down, that tire you out, you can't accomplish the very best within you. So when you change your lifestyle, and it doesn't happen overnight, but food has the power to heal. Food can heal. Food can change the way you think, the way you act, the way you look, the way you interact with people. But that knowledge and that information has to come from, in my opinion, within your community. It has to come from people that you trust, people that are going to share things with you that has worked for them.
Right.
And it comes from a way of just being able to say, well, I don't have to go out and go to a gourmet food store.
Right.
That I can get a head of cabbage.
Right.
And I can get canned beans. And I can get onions and peppers. And I can make a beautiful plant-based meal. I don't like to use a lot of terms, but it's real food.
Right.
I call it global soul food.
Yeah.
Because cabbage is eaten all over the world, peppers, onions, potatoes, sweet potatoes. So these are foods that are part of our culture.
Right.
So they have the power to heal. When you eat good and you feel better, you relate better with your community, with your family, with your children. There's more peace in your community because you're not all stressed out. You're not all bogged down. But when I eat, I've got, oh my God, I've just said, I got to go lay down. I've got to go take a nap. But when you eat real food, then, and you eat it, you don't eat just a whole plate of anything.
Sure.
You want to eat portions.
Right.
And then there's movement. I don't like to use the word exercise because exercise says that, okay, I need a gym membership.
Right.
I need this. Well, all you need to do is walk. Walk up and down the street. Walk up and down the steps. Walk to the store. Park your car far away from the door. Walk. Movement.
Yeah.
Exercise. Yoga. Whatever you want to do. But just move. Things that you can do without having an expense added to it. But movement and eating good food, real food, has the power to transform your life, your body, your thinking.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
That is. Wow, that is really powerful. And I love how you're sort of, and many times we strip the culture from food because we suppose that culture is unhealthy. But what you're suggesting is that actually you can use culture as a vehicle of food to lead to transformation, and that's the soul of it, right?
That's the soul of it. Yeah. It would just be with some ethnic groups, and every ethnic group has a soul food, whether it's Chinese, Hungarian, whatever it is. There's a soul piece to it. So, and our soul piece is the food that we had access to.
Right.
Many of us who came from the South had, as I said, had land, so you could grow almost anything that you wanted. The berries, the fruit trees. You just go out in the yard and grab you some figs off the fig vine. Grab you an apple, a pear, whatever you want. So it's important to not lose your soul, not lose your culture when it comes to your food.
Yeah.
I know someone says, well, we can do a tofu something. I said, well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with any food. All food that's real food is good food.
Sure.
but that does not have to happen to be a part of my culture.
Right.
Sure, I might incorporate it, but all of the things they said now, that if you eat a cup of beans a day,
right.
I think I read someplace where it might add a year or 2 years to your life. A cup of beans, navy beans, black-eyed peas, pinto beans, red beans, things we've been eating all of our life.
Right.
The main thing is, how do we prepare it?
Right.
If we prepare it in its as close to its natural form,
sure,
then we have more nutrients that feed our bodies.
Yeah.
So real food,
yeah,
without giving it a name, our cultural food is some of the most delicious and most inspiring food that there is in the world.
Yeah. That's really great, Vel. And I love your intention with not having to give things names, because it makes it inclusive. Like,
it does.
Anyone can do it. Anyone can move.
Right.
Anyone can eat food. That's real. So thank you. And can you tell us a little bit about your farm project, Vel's Purple Oasis? How does that fit into all of this as we wrap it up in our time together? We can keep talking all day. This is amazing. But tell us a little bit about your Purple Oasis and what that's about.
Vel's Purple Oasis is 2 acres of land that's in the heart of University Circle, again on the fringes of Fairfax. My husband and I and family bought that land at the time that after we built Vel's on the Circle. We thought we would need extra land for parking. But we didn't need that land for parking. So after we sold the business, I decided, well, what am I going to do when I grow up? And my kids, who were adults by that time, says, well, how about like just doing the grandmother role, or just traveling, or doing whatever? I says, well, I can do all of those, but I still want to do something else that involves the community.
Sure.
So I ended up talking to some neighbors and asking them, what do you think if we had a farm garden here? And they said that would be a great idea. So with 2 or 3 neighbors, a woman named Eugenia, Don Smith, the 3 of us actually cleared 1 million pieces, I thought, of rocks out of there to create that farm.
Okay.
And from that initial investment of clearing the land, we have a hoop house on the land. We have fruit trees on the land now. We do cooking classes, workshops. And then we bought a house across the street, the Don Scott house, to connect to the farm, so that when we harvested our greens and our beans and our fruit from the fruit trees, we could take it over to the house and prepare meals and teach classes. So it has actually grown in leaps and bounds. We had universities that have collaborated with us. There's Cleveland State, there's Oberlin College, Case Western Reserve, Green Triangle, just too many organizations to really name.
Sure.
That have come on board since that time. Okay. And now it's a beautiful oasis where we have fruit trees. We do cooking classes. We just have workshops.
Yeah.
We have parties out there. We do yoga. We partnered with the Cleveland Clinic Wellness Department last year. Dr. Robert Saper, who heads that department, got us involved in a chair yoga class. And we had that class in the garden last year, and it was absolutely beautiful. We had about 40 people or more that attended that 8-week class. And then we moved to the Langston Hughes building, which is the old Quincy Library. And we're now doing a 10-week chair yoga piece at that library. So it's all come together. It's pulling all the pieces that we have together under a good umbrella.
Okay.
So that we can do more services and that we can do more sharing of knowledge and information to our wonderful community.
Yeah. Well, wow, Vel. You are an inspiration. Thank you for your work. I'm better because of this conversation we've just had. So I thank you for, again, the work that you've done, the work that you're doing, and will continue to do. the legacy that you've left on the east side in Fairfax and beyond, across the state and beyond that. So you truly are inspiration. So thank you for joining us on the podcast. Are there any last remarks that you want to leave for our listeners? Any encouraging words that you want to offer for those of us who are tuning in?
Well, one of the things I can say is to just stay active, be involved. Never let age be a deterrent. Well, I'm too young to do this, I'm too old to do this. As long as you're here on this earth, obviously you have more work to do. So whatever you can do to help other people, get involved and do that. Eat good, walk wherever you can, have good thoughts, just live up to the very best within you.
Let's go. That's inspiration. Lastly, how can anyone get connected with you if they want to join the movement? How do they reach out to you? Where can they go?
It's a wonderful movement, and you can reach us. We are on Facebook, Instagram. We are Vel Scott's Healthy You, and you can reach us at www.velscott.com. That brings up our website. We're on Instagram. Our phone number is 216-224-1383. Again, that's 216-224-1383. And we're always looking for volunteers. We have a wonderful hydroponic garden that we're installing at the Don Scott House. We could use all the help we can get. So if you're able to volunteer, just send us some good wishes. We are 501c3, so we are open to contributions that are tax exempt. And that's New Image Life Skills Academy, Inc. Okay. And we'd love to hear from y'all.
Yeah. So all y'all listeners, get connected, get plugged in. This is a wonderful movement, and it's been a privilege to talk with you, Vel. And so keep doing amazing things and keep inspiring people, both in your neighborhood and beyond. And so that's it for today's podcast. We hope that you'll tune in next time. Peace.
Peace. Thank you, Bryson.